Posting certain comments online can land you in prison, and if the comments that you post are encouraging others to commit an offence, such as violent disorder, they can land you in prison for the same amount of time as somebody actually committing that offence, even if you never leave your desk when posting these comments. So if you want an alternative to the mainstream media with the raw, unedited version of the truth, which is what I promise you, please subscribe to my channel here and stay tuned. Welcome back to the channel. So first of all, a huge thank you to everybody that has subscribed in the last 24 hours. As you can see with this graph here, there's lots of you have subscribed to my channel. Just from yesterday, today, I can't believe we've smashed through 500,000 subscribers because I just offer you the raw truth on this channel. I won't sugarcoat anything and I'll tell it you as it is. Now and again, I'll give you my opinion on whether I think something is right or not, but that matters not usually because my opinions don't change the law. They don't change things from what they are. But what I can tell you is that we are in times at the moment where people are certainly going to prison for things that they've posted online. And there's a lot of updates to cover in this video, so please do bear with me, but each one is sort of interesting by itself, but I'm going to put them all into one video. So if you haven't subscribed already, please do that now. I'm very grateful this is my first video, over 500,000 subscribers on my goal to 1 million. So there's a stark warning from gov.uk on X here, says, think before you post. Content that incites violence or hatred isn't just harmful, it can be illegal. And the CPS takes online violence very seriously and will prosecute when the legal test is met. Now, lots of people have been criticizing this, saying that you shouldn't be able to be prosecuted for things that you post online, etc. But there is a threshold that if you post certain things that encourages someone else either to stir up certain hatred or to encourage violence or committing an offense and things of this nature, then you very much may well be prosecuted. So I'll come back to those in a moment. Now, first bit of news here is that the CPS has released a statement regarding the Labour councillor who has now been charged. So the CPS says as follows, Jones was filmed addressing a crowd during which he appeared to make remarks and a gesture to encourage others to act violently towards far-right protesters. He's been arrested and charged within 48 hours and will now appear at Westminster Magistrates Court this afternoon. We remind all concerned, now this is very important, bearing in mind everything I've just said about posting things. It will affect how I talk about this, and I'll explain why and how in a moment. As I promised you the raw, unedited truth here, we remind all concerned, the CPS says, that criminal proceedings are active and that he has the right to a fair trial. It is extremely important that there should be no reporting, commentary, or sharing of information online which could in any way prejudice those proceedings. And the reason for that is that if you post comments or encourage the sharing of information which might prejudice proceedings, that can amount to contempt of court. So in this case, because proceedings are live, you should ideally refrain from posting your opinions and your comments and sharing information that could in any way prejudice these proceedings, because he has the right to a fair trial. Everybody does. Everybody that is charged with an offence is presumed innocent until proven guilty, which is why you cannot just say this person did this thing and they've committed this criminal offence, because they haven't been convicted yet. And so this warrants a little bit of explanation here, in that every case must be proved by the prosecution to the same criminal standard. And unless, of course, they plead guilty to an offence. And if they plead not guilty, which either means they deny the offence outright, or they say that they have some legal defence which might amount to reasonable excuse in certain situations or whatever, then they have the right to a fair trial. And if you post information online which could ultimately be spread, particularly in recent years, with the speed of which that information spreads online and everybody can see and hear that information, if it is designed in such a way to prejudice a trial, or you're reckless as to whether that can do so, and you don't have any sort of caveats and disclaimers along with what you say, then if it does prejudice these proceedings in any way, it can amount to contempt of court. So if in doubt, don't pass comment. Because the reason for that is if this information were to come into the hands of a jury that is deliberating on any prosecution, and whilst they are instructed, and most of us do trust juries not to research cases online and not to be swayed by what they see online, there is the potential here of the sharing of information to prejudice a case like that, which is why it's so important, this stark warning from the CPS here, particularly in cases like this, in times like now with these riots and people doing certain things, shouting certain things, sharing certain things, and now being arrested and charged. Now, it's interesting that he's been charged here with 1 count of encouraging violent disorder. Now, that could have been more severe, and so this was the choice of charge that the CPS has authorised the police to make. So that is one bit of news update here. I did see lots of commentary online. Discussing whether or not the likelihood of Jones being charged with any offence following this incident. And indeed, he has been arrested and charged within 48 hours, which does show you, if nothing else, that the authorities are taking this very seriously. And so, in all seriousness, when Sir Keir Starmer said that these offences are going to be approached with the full force of the law, some people in the comment section have quite rightly observed and commented that the full force of the law could mean this to be that they will deploy all available resources, they will look at everything, rather than using discretion as to how to approach these things. They are going to approach all of these things very seriously. Now, in the same light of posting things online, there is another case, and just before I go on to that case, you'll understand why I'm not commenting specifically on the Jones case and prospects and things like that. For obvious reasons, I can't and I won't comment on prospects and things like that because of the reason outlined by the CPS. I could not have there any possibility of anyone being swayed by what I think, and therefore don't give you my opinion. And that is also, incidentally, interestingly enough, why big news media outlets like, let's say, for example, Sky News, why they very often turn off the comments to their posts or their videos. It is not because they don't want to engage conversation with you. It's not because they are silencing you and stopping you from talking to each other or passing comment about it. It is to prevent, it's really to help you, to prevent you from landing yourself in trouble by prejudicing the proceedings. And incidentally, Sky News does have a duty to ensure that that's the case as well. And so, and with regard to YouTube has a liability for such comments. Much like if there's comments that people don't like underneath the video, the liability is either with the person making the comment or it lies with YouTube. But by the by, let's take a look now at another bit of news which I promised some people yesterday that I would talk about here. Again, talking generically as to the offence and only specifically as to the fact that this woman has been arrested. So a woman has been arrested in connection with inaccurate social media posts regarding the original incident with the 3 young girls. Obviously dodging certain words here so as to not flag the YouTube algorithm and limit the video. But she was arrested earlier, I think that was yesterday, yes, on the 8th, yes, on suspicion of publishing material to stir up racial hatred, which is Section 19 of the Public Order Act. I'll come back to that in a minute. And false communications. Now, many people have commented, and again, I'm not going to talk specifically about this case, but generically about the false communications bit, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And this post said from Cheshire Constabulary that she's being held by police, where she's assisting officers with their inquiries. And so it's entirely possible that they are going to discuss with her the future of what's going to happen, etc. That is entirely down to them, and again, not for us to comment. But there are 2 reasons here that she's been arrested. The first is Section 19 of the Public Order Act, which is publishing or distributing written material. And so a person commits an offence if they publish or distribute written material which is threatening, abusive, or insulting, and they intend to stir up racial hatred, or having regard to all the circumstances, racial hatred is likely to be stirred up thereby. So just pausing there for a moment. A lot of people, and I'm talking generically here, a lot of people have talked online about the right to the freedom of expression. Well, yes, but is the answer to that, because we have certain rights, and very few of those are absolute rights, and most of them are qualified rights, meaning that the state can interfere with those rights for essentially the greater good. So the freedom of expression under Article 10 ECHR is a right enshrined in law, and the courts do uphold the right to the freedom of expression. Many people sort of refer to that as freedom of speech. It's not quite the same thing, but I use freedom of speech often just because it's easier to understand. But broadly speaking, it's the same thing. But as I said, it is a qualified right. You have the right to express yourself freely in any way you wish, so long as it doesn't break any of these laws. Now, many people think that's a contradiction. Many people think that is eroding the freedom of expression or free speech, and you're right. And so in the spirit of my channel here, so if you like the free, unedited, raw truth of these things, please do subscribe. I'm telling you as it is. So at the same time, don't shoot the messenger. I'm telling you what the law is. I'm not necessarily telling you that I agree or disagree with it. Now, I think in a civilized society, we shouldn't say things that are going to encourage others to hurt other people. In a civilized society, that would obviously be wrong. And we shouldn't encourage people to do these things. But that's by the by. That wanders into my opinion, and that's sort of irrelevant. The fact of the matter is, there are laws preventing and curtailing what you are allowed to say, and they restrict and they sculpt what you're allowed to say within the bounds of the law. So under Section 19, publishing or distributing material which is intended to, or having regard to all the circumstances, is likely to stir up racial hatred, is this offence under public order. So that is one of these things that can come back if you've posted something online that is likely to do any of that. The second offence that this lady's been arrested on suspicion of is false communications under Section 179 of the Online Safety Act 2023. Somewhat controversial, but nonetheless, again, I'm going to speak generically about this rather than that case specifically. But the Online Safety Act 2023, there's an offence under Section 179, which is false communications. Now, a person commits an offence if they send a message and the message conveys information that the person knows to be false, and that at the time of sending it, the person intended the message or the information in it to cause non-trivial psychological or physical harm to a likely audience, and the person's got no reasonable excuse for sending the message. Now, the reasonable excuse bit is only really for official capacities. For example, if you had a message you want to report it to the police, then obviously you are conveying a message which includes false information, whatever. But if you're reporting it, you've got a reasonable excuse. So things like that would generally be fine. Obviously, if you're reporting a crime to the police or you're handing something into the police, it's a little bit like picking something up that shouldn't be in the road and you're taking it directly to the police. The police are hardly likely to charge you with an offence if you are handing something in that you found on the street which is dangerous. It's a little bit like that. But this is not that scenario. So we're talking here about a scenario generally where a person has sent a message or information or conveyed information such as a post or whatever, and that they intended the message or the information within it to cause non-trivial psychological or physical harm. So something a little bit more serious. And so again, I can't comment on this particular case, but if, for example, you were talking about certain events and you were conveying information that you knew to be false and you intended that message or information to cause non-trivial psychological or physical harm, then that might amount to this offence. There is this mental element to this particular offence where the person knew the information to be false and the person intended the message to cause non-trivial harm of some such. The next bit of news and update is that this 18-year-old has been sentenced to 20 months for hurling missiles such as wood and bottles at police officers. So again, he's gone straight to prison for 20 months. I presume that the standard rules will apply and that he will serve up to half of it in custody and the other half on license if and when he becomes eligible, so long as he complies with all the requirements and so on, which is exactly what the judge said in sentencing remarks to Jordan Parler, 28 years old, who was also jailed for 20 months for stirring up racial hatred on social media. Now, obviously, I can't repeat the words that he used, but the words that he used was encouraging others to attack a hotel at which he knew that asylum seekers were staying, and he encouraged others to do so. So whilst the judge commented that whilst it was clear that he didn't intend to do that himself, he was certainly encouraging others to do exactly that. And so this is why I said at the very outset that you can be sentenced to a custodial term for the same amount of time for the same kind of disorder as someone who's actually there hurling missiles. So in one case, someone throwing missiles at the police received a custodial sentence of 20 months, and likewise Jordan Parler, 20 months for, again, a Facebook post, I think it was, stirring up hatred by encouraging others to attack a hotel. And the latest figures that I saw suggest that almost 600 people have been arrested in relation to all of this disorder so far, with Sir Keir Starmer saying that the police are going to remain on high alert for anyone else committing the same kind of offences. And in yet more news, you might remember in the Hugh Edwards case, where I said that Jeremy Vine raised a very valid question that he might have to be asked to repay some of the salary that he'd been paid since his arrest. The BBC now reports that it has asked Hugh Edwards to return more than £200,000. It says Hugh Edwards has been asked by the BBC to hand back more than £200,000 of the salary that he earned after being arrested in November. And again, for the same reasons that I said it would likely be, that he's behaved in bad faith, because any position like this on a salary like this will have a morality clause in the contract. I've not seen it, but I presume there is. Most contracts like that do. And just as a recall, he was suspended in July last year and arrested in November, but those incidents were not connected, so say the police. And so, just to reiterate, the BBC's asked him to repay more than £200,000 in salary. Now, whether he still got that money is entirely another question, but that will be a legal issue for them to wrangle over. And in yet more news, the final one I promise you, Katie Price has been arrested at Heathrow Airport and produced to a judge who said that she must attend a further court hearing, no ifs or buts. There was an arrest warrant issued on the 30th of July, and she now has to return to court for a further hearing on the 27th of August. The judge said you have to attend on that date. No ifs or buts, no going abroad, no holidays. And the judge ordered Katie Price to give an undertaking to the court. That is a promise that you can't break, else there'll be consequences. An undertaking that she would attend court to answer questions over her finances. The judge said if you breach the undertaking in any way, shape or form, you'll be brought back into custody. It is quite a serious matter. So, in other words, the raw truth is, if she fails to attend court on the 27th of August, she's likely to be brought back into custody and quite possibly for contempt of court. So those are some of the updates. Thank you all once again for subscribing to my channel here. As I say, I promise you nothing but the raw truth of the matters and the law as neutrally and objectively as I can. So once again, thank you all so much for 500,000 subscribers. It really means a lot to me. If you want to hear my personal opinions, you can find those on Black Belt Secrets, link below. If you want to hear more about starting businesses, making money and things like that, my other channel is Daniel Shensmith. And don't forget our Alan Robert Shaw over on Art of Law. Yes, it rhymes. I'll link that in the description below as well. Go say hi. Tell him I said hi. You'll love his content and more exciting scenery than mine. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.